Marni Yang. In April 2005, Marni Yang was detained by security at Fort Lauderdale International Airport when she attempted to bring 2 handguns and nearly 200 rounds of ammunition onto a flight without the necessary paperwork. The weapons belonged to her uncle, but investigators later connected at least one of them, a black 9mm Beretta with imitation pearl grips, to Yang. According to testimony, she practiced firing that pistol at a local range, and the owner of the range, Don Mastriani, even altered the grips at her request to make it easier to handle. She also purchased 9mm ammunition from him around that time. By the summer of 2007, Yang's preparations had escalated. Records showed she bought a 2-volume book set titled How to Make Disposable Silencers online, and the very next day she signed for the package at her home. Shortly after, she was seen purchasing parts at Home Depot that could be fashioned into a homemade silencer. Her movements grew even more suspicious in October 2007 when she rented a black Volkswagen just one day before Ronnie Reuter was gunned down. Witnesses reported seeing a car of that same make and color speeding away from the scene. Although Yang was initially given a blue car, she insisted on returning it in exchange for the black Volkswagen and paid for it in cash. Financial records also revealed that Yang had spent money on dozens of online background checks, using them to dig up personal information on multiple women romantically linked to former Chicago Bears player Sean Gale. When investigators searched Yang's home, they found typed but unsent letters nearly identical to one discovered in Reuter's purse. They also found address labels tied to the background check company and return labels bearing Sean Gale's name and address. She was found guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder of Ronnie Reuter and her unborn child and was sentenced to 65 years in prison. Tiffany Hall. In September 2006, 23-year-old Jamela Tunstall of East St. Louis, Illinois, was 7 months pregnant when she crossed paths with her longtime friend, 24-year-old Tiffany Hall. Hall had been telling others she was pregnant, but this was a lie. On September 15, 2006, she lured Jamela into a deadly encounter, striking her repeatedly with a table leg until she died. Hall then cut into Jamela's abdomen and removed the unborn child, but the baby did not survive. Hall then wrapped Jamela's body in a shower curtain and dumped it in an overgrown lot in East St. Louis, where it was later discovered. Days later, Hall turned her attention to Jamela's 3 children, 7-year-old Demont, 2-year-old Ivan, and 1-year-old Janella. According to her later admissions, she drowned all 3 in a bathtub at her boyfriend's apartment in Belleville, Illinois. Investigators later found their small bodies stuffed into the washer and dryer inside that apartment. When first questioned, Hall denied responsibility, but her story quickly fell apart. She was arrested on September 23, 2006, and charged with multiple counts including first-degree murder, intentional homicide of an unborn child, and concealment of a homicidal death. A St. Clair County grand jury returned indictments, and Hall was ordered to undergo a psychological evaluation before trial. In 2008, facing overwhelming evidence, Hall pleaded guilty in 2 separate cases, one covering the deaths of Jamela and her unborn child, and another covering the murders of the 3 children. On October 8, 2008, Tiffany Hall was sentenced to natural life in prison without the possibility of parole. Tina Jones. In 2018, Tina Jones, a nurse from Des Plaines, Illinois, became consumed with jealousy after an affair with a married physician. Wanting to remove his wife from the picture, she turned to the dark web, attempting to use bitcoins to hire a contract killer through a site called Sicilian Hitmen International Network. She provided not only the woman's name, but also her photograph, address, and even her husband's work schedule to ensure the plan would succeed. The FBI's Cyber Crimes Unit intercepted the request before it could be carried out, and investigators traced the Bitcoin transaction back to Tina Jones and quickly built a case showing her intent. She was arrested by the Woodridge police on April 17, 2018, and charged with attempted first-degree murder. On April 15, 2019, Jones pleaded guilty to attempted first-degree murder and was sentenced to 12 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections. By law, she must serve at least 85% of her term before release. Sarah Ann Kolb. She was born on April 23, 1988, and convicted of the 2005 murder of her 16-year-old classmate, Adrienne Lee Reynolds, who had moved from Kilgore, Texas to East Moline, Illinois. Reynolds was beaten and strangled inside a car parked at a fast food restaurant in Moline. After her death, her body was burned, dismembered, and discarded in multiple locations. At the time of the crime, Sarah Kolb was 16 years old and her co-defendant, Corey Gregory, was 17. On February 22, 2006, she was convicted of first-degree murder and concealment of a homicidal death. She was sentenced to 48 years for first-degree murder and 5 years for concealment of homicidal death to be served consecutively, for a total of 53 years in prison. Nicole Abu Sharif. In March 2007, Rebecca Klein was reported missing from her home in Villa Park, Illinois. Her partner, Nicole Abu Sharif, told police that she did not know where Klein had gone. Within days, officers found Klein's body in the trunk of her own car. She had been suffocated with a plastic bag, wrapped in duct tape and left hidden in the vehicle. The investigators quickly turned their attention to Abu Sharif. Friends revealed that she had been lying about many aspects of her life, falsely claiming she was a firefighter, a CIA agent, and even terminally ill. At the same time, she had been pursuing a romantic relationship with another woman named Rose Sodaro. Prosecutors argued that Abu Sharif killed Klein to remove her as an obstacle and to benefit from a $400,000 life insurance policy. The evidence against her was overwhelming. Police recovered Klein's blood in the home she shared with Abu Sharif, along with duct tape and garbage bags matching those used to conceal the body. DNA testing and fingerprint evidence further tied her to the crime, and witnesses also testified that Abu Sharif went out shopping with Sodaro only hours after Klein's death, showing no signs of grief. On May 5, 2009, Nicole Abu Sharif was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 50 years in prison. She is currently serving her sentence at Logan Correctional Center in Illinois, where she is listed among the prison's most notable inmates. Catherine Sue. On September 25, 1993, Robert O'Dubain, a nightclub owner in Chicago's Bucktown neighborhood, was ambushed and shot twice in the head inside his garage. The crime shocked the city because it was not a random killing, but a plot devised within the victim's closest circle. Investigators soon discovered that the gunman was Andrew Sue, a bright former valedictorian with no history of violence. He admitted that his older sister, Catherine Sue, had pressured and manipulated him into carrying out the murder. According to prosecutors, Catherine promised her brother money and convinced him he owed her this act of loyalty. She wanted Robert dead to benefit financially and to free herself from a relationship she described as abusive and unstable. The Sue siblings' troubled past added to the story's complexity because years earlier their mother had been murdered, and the case remains unsolved. After the killing, Catherine fled Chicago. She was placed on America's Most Wanted and became one of the most notorious fugitives of the decade. Authorities eventually tracked her down in Hawaii in 1995, where she was arrested and returned to Cook County. Andrew Sue confessed his role and received an 80-year prison sentence. Catherine herself was tried separately, and in 1996 a Cook County jury found her guilty of first-degree murder and solicitation of murder. She was sentenced to life in prison. Jacqueline Williams. In November 1995, inside the community of Addison, Illinois, 28-year-old Deborah Evans, who was pregnant and already the mother of 3 children, became the target of Jacqueline Williams. Williams, desperate to provide a baby for her boyfriend Fidel Caffey, plotted with him and her cousin Laverne Ward to abduct Evans's unborn child. On November 16th, the trio forced their way into Evans's apartment, where they stabbed her to death, and her 10-year-old daughter Samantha was also killed inside the home. Williams then cut Evans's unborn baby from her womb, taking the infant boy alive. Later, the group abducted Evans's 7-year-old son Joshua and murdered him as well. Only Evans's 15-month-old son Jordan was left behind in his crib, spared amid the carnage. The killers were quickly tracked down after Williams attempted to present the newborn as her own child. Within days, Williams, Caffey, and Ward were arrested, and the horrifying details of their crime became public. Prosecutors described the murders as calculated and ruthless, carried out with shocking precision to satisfy Williams's obsession. In May 1998, a DuPage County jury convicted Williams of murder, aggravated kidnapping, and related charges, and on July 10, she was sentenced to death for the killings of Deborah Evans, Samantha Evans, and Joshua Evans. But in 2003, Illinois Governor George Ryan commuted all state death sentences to life imprisonment without parole, and today, Jacqueline Annette Williams remains in the custody of the Illinois Department of Corrections, serving out a natural life term for one of the most infamous crimes in Illinois history. Patricia Colbo. In May 1976, Elk Grove Village, Illinois, became the scene of one of the state's most shocking family murders, after 19-year-old Patricia Colbo, along with her 37-year-old married lover, Frank DeLuca, conspired to kill her parents and younger brother. The motive was rooted in Patty's resentment toward her parents, Frank and Mary Colbo, who disapproved of her relationship with DeLuca and sought to control her lifestyle. On May 4, 1976, the couple carried out the plan. Frank and Mary Colbo, along with their 13-year-old son Michael, were brutally slain in their home. Investigators documented that the killings were marked by extreme violence: beatings, multiple stab wounds, and gunshots. Evidence quickly pointed to Patty and DeLuca. Records later showed that Patty had previously tried to solicit others to kill her family, but when those attempts failed, she and DeLuca decided to act themselves. Both were arrested shortly after the murders. The following year, in Cook County Court, Patty Colbo was convicted on 3 counts of murder and solicitation. On May 17, 1977, she was sentenced to 200 to 300 years in prison for each of the 3 murders, to run concurrently, along with additional terms for solicitation. DeLuca received the same punishment. Marilyn Lemak. In March 1999, the quiet community of Naperville, Illinois was shaken when 3 young children were found dead inside their suburban home. The victims were 7-year-old Emily, 6-year-old Thomas, and 3-year-old Nicholas. Their mother, Marilyn Lemak, a 41-year-old former surgical nurse, was accused of poisoning them with sedatives and then smothering them with a pillow. Authorities discovered the children arranged on a bed, as if they were peacefully asleep. Investigators revealed that Marilyn had been separated from her husband, Dr. David Lemak, and was struggling with depression. Prosecutors argued during trial that her actions were not only calculated but also driven by a motive of revenge against her estranged husband. The defense countered that she was overwhelmed by mental illness and despair. In December 2001, a jury found Marilyn Lemak guilty of first-degree murder in the deaths of her 3 children, and on May 30, 2002, she was sentenced in DuPage County to natural life in prison without the possibility of parole. Elzbieta Plackowska. On October 30, 2012, Naperville police were called to a townhouse where they made a shocking discovery. Inside, they found the bodies of 2 children, 7-year-old Justin Plackowska and 5-year-old Olivia Drorakowski, brutally stabbed to death as they slept. The killer was identified as Justin's own mother, Elzbieta Plackowska, who had been babysitting Olivia that evening while her mother worked a night shift. Prosecutors later revealed that Plackowska armed herself with knives and targeted the children in a violent spree that also left 2 dogs dead. She gave police shifting explanations, claiming she was overwhelmed, that voices pushed her to act, and that she believed she was sending the children to heaven. But investigators said her actions were calculated because she attempted to clean the crime scene and later went to a church, where she confessed to a priest before being taken into custody by police. On September 27, 2017, Judge Robert Miller found Elzbieta Plackowska guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and aggravated animal cruelty. She was sentenced to natural life in prison without the possibility of parole. Cynthia Baker. In Bloomington, Illinois, an 8-year-old girl named Rika Roundtree endured months of horrific abuse before her life was violently taken. Her father's girlfriend, Cynthia Baker, became the focus of investigators after Rika was rushed to the hospital on January 26, 2019, and pronounced dead. Doctors determined she had died from blunt force trauma to the abdomen, so severe it caused a ruptured intestine and fatal peritonitis. An autopsy was done and it revealed something even darker: 67 separate injuries across her body, old and new, showing a long pattern of physical abuse. During the trial in McLean County, prosecutors presented disturbing evidence, including videos taken by Baker herself. The clips showed Rika being berated, slapped, and demeaned in ways that the jury later described as unthinkable. Witnesses, including teachers and neighbors, had previously observed bruises and warning signs, but the child welfare system failed to intervene in time. Prosecutors argued that Baker targeted Rika in particular, while her father, Richard Roundtree, allowed the abuse to continue unchecked. On November 15, 2019, Cynthia Baker was found guilty of first-degree murder and aggravated battery of a child. She was sentenced to natural life in prison without the possibility of parole. Melissa Calusinski. In January 2009, 16-month-old Benjamin Kingan suddenly collapsed while at the Marni Yang in the Park Daycare Center in Lincolnshire, Illinois. His caregiver that day, 22-year-old Melissa Calusinski, was a teacher's aide with no prior criminal record, until medical examiners determined that Benjamin had suffered a severe head injury. Investigators questioned Melissa for nearly 10 hours. During that interrogation, she eventually stated that she had thrown the toddler to the floor in frustration. Prosecutors later argued that her taped confession was credible and matched the medical examiner's findings of a skull fracture. Her defense, however, maintained that the confession was coerced, emphasizing her intellectual limitations and pointing to medical evidence of a prior head injury Benjamin had suffered. Melissa was arrested on January 15, 2009, and charged with first-degree murder in Lake County. She was found guilty 2 years later, and on March 31, 2012, Judge Daniel Shaines sentenced her to 31 years in prison. Christine Roush. From Washington, Illinois, Christine Roush was convicted of murdering her birth mother, Ann Teresa Puhlman, in 2017. The killing took place at the Sugar Grove Nature Preserve in Funk's Grove, where Roush strangled and stabbed her mother. She was later sentenced to 40 years in prison and is currently serving her sentence at Logan Correctional Center. A co-defendant, Matthew Isbell of Marquette Heights, was involved in the crime as well. He drove Roush and her mother to Funk's Grove and helped cover up the killing. In 2019, Isbell pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of second-degree murder and was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Roush's 40-year sentence reflects the severity of the crime, ensuring that she will remain behind bars for decades. Bethany McKee. On January 9, 2013, Bethany McKee joined with 3 friends, Joshua Minor, Adam Landerman, and Elisa Massaro, in a deadly plot inside a Joliet home on Hickory Street. They invited 2 men, Eric Glover and Terrence Rankins, who were both 22 years old, under the pretense of hanging out. Once they were inside, the men were ambushed. Prosecutors later revealed that Minor and Landerman strangled both victims to death, while the group planned to rob them of cash and personal belongings. When the murders were complete, the bodies of Glover and Rankins were hidden under clothing inside the house. Investigators testified that McKee had lured the victims to the residence knowing what was about to happen. Police were tipped off by McKee's own father, who reported what she had told him, and when officers arrived, they discovered the concealed bodies, and all 4 suspects were arrested the same night. During her trial in Will County, testimony showed that although McKee did not physically strangle the victims, she was a willing participant and had played a central role in setting the trap. In August 2014, Judge Gerald Kinney found her guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, and in November he sentenced her to natural life in prison with no chance of parole. Clarissa Figueroa. In April 2019, 19-year-old Marlon Ocho Lopez, who was 9 months pregnant, vanished after visiting a home in Chicago's Southwest Side. She had been lured there by 46-year-old Clarissa Figueroa, who pretended she had baby clothes to give away. Instead, prosecutors said, Clarissa and her daughter Desiree strangled Marlon with a cable inside the Figueroa house. After killing her, Clarissa cut the baby from Marlon's womb. She then called 911, falsely claiming she had just delivered a child who wasn't breathing. The newborn was taken to a hospital in grave condition and survived for several weeks before dying of severe brain damage. DNA testing quickly confirmed that the child was Marlyn's, and investigators exposed Clarissa's fabricated pregnancy and charged her, her daughter Desiree, and her boyfriend Peter Bobak. Bobak was accused of helping conceal the crime scene, while Desiree admitted to helping her mother carry out the killing. In January 2024, Clarissa Figueroa pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and was sentenced to 50 years in prison. Under the terms of her plea, she must serve the full sentence without early release. Desiree Figueroa was sentenced to 30 years for her role, and Bobak received 4 years for concealing a homicide. McCarron. In May 2006, Morton, Illinois was shaken when 3-year-old Catherine Katie McCarron, a child diagnosed with autism, was found dead in her grandmother's home. The cause of death was found to be by suffocation, and suspicion quickly turned toward her mother, Dr. Karen McCarron, a 37-year-old pathologist. During questioning, Karen admitted that she had placed a plastic garbage bag over Katie's head and held it tightly until the child stopped breathing. Investigators later learned that she had driven Katie away from the house and carried out the act in her car before returning and placing her daughter in bed, to make it appear as if she were napping. Prosecutors in Tazewell County charged Karen with first-degree murder, obstructing justice, and concealment of a homicidal death. On January 14, 2008, Karen McCarron was found guilty on all counts and was sentenced to 36 years in prison for the murder, followed by 30 months of probation on the lesser charges. She is currently serving her sentence at Logan Correctional Center in Illinois. Shirley Skinner. On November 25, 2008, 32-year-old Stephen Watkins drove to Ashland, Illinois, to pick up his daughter for a scheduled visitation. The court had granted him the right to see his child that evening, but tension surrounded the exchange because his estranged wife's family strongly opposed his custody rights. When Watkins entered the home of his former in-laws, he was confronted by his former mother-in-law, Shirley Skinner. Skinner, then in her 60s, retrieved a .410 shotgun and fired a single round into the back of Watkins' head as he turned to leave. The shot killed him instantly. Investigators determined the attack was not self-defense, but an intentional act, meant to prevent Watkins from having access to his daughter. The child was inside the house when her father was murdered. Skinner was immediately arrested and charged with first-degree murder, as well as solicitation of murder, after evidence emerged that she had previously discussed harming Watkins. Prosecutors argued the crime was deliberate, fueled by the bitter custody dispute that had divided the families. Her defense claimed she acted out of panic, but the evidence showed otherwise. In May 2010, a Cass County jury found Shirley Skinner guilty of first-degree murder, and she was sentenced to 55 years in prison. The Illinois Appellate Court later affirmed the murder conviction and sentence, though it reversed the solicitation charges. Skinner remains incarcerated, serving a punishment that ensures she will never leave prison alive. If you enjoyed this and want to see more interesting videos, I'm going to be posting every day on this channel. I would really appreciate it if you like and subscribe. Thank you very much.